So there's a misconception that if you're single, you are incomplete, perhaps damaged, salvaged, and you won't be happy until you find your one. And that is not true. That is bullshit. It is a message that has been fed to us by media and advertising. The truth is, when you're single, you have the richest soil for growth. That's why I created this podcast. And unlike other podcasts, this one is host-driven, not guest-driven. That means I will be rotating health and wellness experts 3 times a week to give you the giant box of wellness crayons, not just the primary colors, so you can start building a meaningful life. It's time to give singlehood a cape.
I am Lindsay Burke, and I am joined today by Mauri Konell, the founder of the Girls Empowerment Experience, which is a movement, mindfulness, mindset, and mental health program that empowers all girls and women with confidence, courage, connection, and creativity for them to really find themselves. And she has personally turned her pain into purpose, forever on her own self-love journey, which she is constantly talking about and sharing with others. She uses her personal experiences with overcoming eating disorders, substance abuse, perfectionism, and her own codependency in relationships to coach these girls and women and mentor others to be themselves, to love themselves, and ultimately create their own best lives. So she is just so awesome. I'm excited to have her on the program today. She is also a martial artist, which is how I met her, a CrossFitter, a weightlifter, a women's coach, and just the most incredible partner and mom. And it's just been an honor to call her a friend for so many years. So I want to go ahead and bring her on right now. Just excited to have you on this show because, first of all, we go way back. Can you believe it? It has been at least a decade back to our teaching martial arts days. It's just wild. Do you feel like I don't even know who that woman was then at times?
Just like watching a movie sometimes. Like, I know that was me, but sometimes I forget that was me, because it was such a different life.
A different life, a different mindset. I know. I look at pictures and just can't believe we were babies. Oh, we were so young.
Yeah. I was 19. I would think I was in college, and I knew nothing.
Just winging it. I mean, I just remember even looking up to other instructors and other the owner of the company and all of these people, and just they were idols. They were I put them all up on pedestals. Like, surely by the time I get to that age, I'm going to know what I'm doing. And then here I am looking back and thinking, oh, still don't know. Still figuring it out. So yeah, I am so excited to have you on the show today. For so many reasons that could take up 10 episodes, and we are most definitely going to be doing more episodes in the future. So folks, tune in. But for today, if you are up for it, Mauri, I really just want to focus on your personal journey. And I think you have such a powerful story about overcoming and about growth and about personal responsibility and taking responsibility for the life that you'd like to live and the person who you want to evolve into. And I just want to hear about, especially for those listeners out there feeling like, I just don't even know where to get started. I don't even know where I'm at, and I feel so lost. Who was that person before you became an empowerment coach, helping girls and young women really begin to take hold of their life and understand who they are and what really matters to them? So I would love to just give you the floor and let you get started about your own growth. Who is, what's that origin story? Who is that young woman?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's wild because this wasn't always a story that I could share freely, or, I'm going to tell this story with what will sound like so much confidence because I've practiced. I've told this story hundreds, if not thousands of times, but there was a time where this story was so shameful for me. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't even say the words eating disorder. Um, so I'm just so thankful and humbled to be able to share. I've found in my life in these last 10 years that it is vulnerability that brings us together as humans, and
Yes.
openness and honesty that, you know, we are all so the same and so different, but
Yes.
so much the same as humans. So thank you for having me and letting me share the
Of
story.
course. I
I,
appreciate you saying that too. I appreciate you
yeah,
acknowledging that it's not always easy and it's not always with confidence that we're experiencing these early stages of our life, that it's embarrassing and that we're stumbling and that there's a lot of shame around it that we have to overcome and this inadequacy that shows up.
mm,
Yeah, that it didn't start out with, well, this is something I've been through and I've taken hold of it, that there was a lot of pain and suffering and shame.
well, and it's amazing what starts to happen when you start sharing that. It's like you take the power away from those voices of shame and embarrassment, inadequacy, because the longer you keep your story inside, the more those voices are doing push-ups and squats and deadlifts in the corner, and they're getting stronger and stronger. And it's like there's a monster under the bed, and then you pull up the covers and you look, and it's just this little girl, and she just needs a hug, and she just needs to be seen. So
Huge.
I think part of sharing your story is freeing yourself from that story, you know, and knowing that you always get to write your story, you know, and my story is so much a part of who I am, and it's what I have created. I've created my life out of my story, but I also recognize that I can't hold on to the old story because
Mm,
empowering that, right? And we always get to choose what we're empowering. So
sure.
I share this story because I know, not because I want to tell people what to do or what to think or how to think or who to be or what to be, but because I want to give people a space to sort of find themselves in bits and pieces, maybe, of this story where, oh my gosh, I've been through that, or whoa, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way, or wow, that makes total sense for me now in my life, right? Because that's part of how I healed, was finding other women and people who had been through similar things that I had gone through, and learning from them, right? And still constantly learning, right? And that's,
Yes.
I'm not, there's no finish line. There's no, you know, I'm not here to say, oh, I'm enlightened. I'm the Buddha. I'm, you know,
Yes.
oh, got this self-love thing. No, it's
Yeah.
an endless journey of self-love and evolution, and we're constantly learning, constantly growing. And the more I tell this story, the more I learn about myself. So, as you said, I do coach and mentor mostly girls and women, in confidence and self-love, but that was born out of my lack of confidence and self love. I deeply, deeply struggled with being myself from a very, very young age. I can remember being 4 and 5 years old and having, you know, what would be
Wow.
considered panic attacks, but no one talked about it.
Wow.
It was,
Yeah, you
um,
don't know what it is then.
yeah, it was, you know, toughen up, or you're making a big deal out of it. There's nothing wrong. Buck up, which, you know, bless my mom, was her way of saying, like, you can do this. But I interpret it as, there's something terribly wrong with me. You know, I shouldn't feel what I'm feeling. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, right? Oh, I shouldn't be
Right.
feeling this way. Um,
Yeah. I need to fix this. This is must be broken. This is a thing that's wrong with me that must be broken.
exactly. And, you know, I can
Yeah.
remember coping with it as a perfectionist. Like I said, even when I was 5 and 6 years old, I refused to play
Wow.
sports. I was so afraid of failing in front of other people, or letting a team down, or, you know, not being the best on the team. If I wasn't the best, I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't do it at all, which now I
Done.
consider failing, right? That is the only way you can fail, is if you don't try. So I was self-sabotaging in that way, but I didn't understand that, of course. I would say things to my mom like,
Sure.
I don't want to wear the uniforms, and no, I'm not going to do that on the weekends. And she had no idea that what I was actually grappling with was perfectionism.
I'm so glad you say that, actually,
Oh,
Mauri. I'm so glad that you even mentioned, for especially for parents out there listening, to
mm,
hear that when your child is having some kind of pushback
yeah.
about things that are kind of ancillary like that, that maybe we need to be really listening to what's going on underneath that. And also, to be said, we still do that as adults too.
Totally.
Like, we agonize about what to wear and how we're going to do this, all these other things where the root of it is, am I going to be good enough? Am I
Well, I'm
going to
saying,
be able to
right?
perform?
I'm so afraid of not belonging that I self out of belonging before I can even have a shot at it, right? Because as Brene Brown
Yeah.
said, no, until we belong to ourselves, we're not going to belong anywhere. And
Yes.
Maya Angelou, I love what she says. She says, even when we belong to ourselves, we belong nowhere and everywhere, right? Which is so
Yes.
beautiful. Um, and you're right. Children ask for love in the most unloving of ways. They ask for attention and to get their needs met in ways that oftentimes might sound like a tantrum or pushback, as you said, or even disrespect towards parents, when really what they're needing is connection and to be seen and to be heard and to get
Yeah.
curious and ask questions about what their experience might be. But it's really challenging for parents to do that if they're not doing that for themselves. My
Yes.
parents loved me and my brother deeply, but they really struggled with regulating their own emotions. There was no discussion of feelings in my family. It was very unpredictable and chaotic growing up. My parents fought every day. I never saw partnership. I never saw love. Definitely didn't see affection. And I never saw repair or, you know, reconciliation after these conflicts. And so every day was very much like this sort of what's going to happen today feeling, walking on eggshells. Like, what is going to trigger this sort of dysregulation in my home? And then it would just escalate and escalate and escalate until my dad would leave because that was his coping skill. So for me early on, I learned, number one, that love is chaotic and love is
Mm.
dysregulated. And number
Mm.
two, that people you love will leave, and that you're not important is how I interpreted that. Um,
Mm.
I also, learned really early on that I would try to control and I would try to fix and I would try to mediate. And so that sort of led into my people pleasing, right? Like, if I can just be good enough and if I can fix this, if I can make mommy and daddy stop fighting, then I'm good enough, right? Like, then I'm the fixer. So that was
Sure.
really early roots of my codependency and becoming enmeshed
Sure.
feelings. But like I said, I had no modeling of emotion,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So these sort of panic attacks or tantrums or outbursts that I was having was all I knew. I didn't know any other way to cope with big feelings. And like I said, big feelings to me were bad, right? Because, well, my parents
Okay.
never talked about their feelings. It was just chaos. And then the next day, we'd all pretend like nothing had happened, even though
Mm.
we were hungover and puffy eyed and,
Yes.
completely empty and in
Mm.
completely shot. Um, so this is kind of the home that I grew up in, and my mom is she and I are so similar. She was very much also the perfectionist, like her way of
Mm.
coping and surviving was keeping everything together. And so she had to really, she felt like she had to control in order for everything to not fall apart. Um,
Sure. Sure.
I learn about control that way, but I also internalized it in this way of like, I don't want to be controlled. Right. And I didn't
Mm.
feel belonging at home. I also didn't feel belonging at school. I went to a private school. In third grade, I had three boys and
Mm.
three girls in my class. And in fourth grade,
Oh, wow.
but needless to say, the school shut down. There was not enough
Oh,
kids in the school. So fourth
oh gosh.
grade school, And there was no preparation. I don't recall anybody explaining to me that I was going to go from 6 kids to 36 kids and, a school of 20 kids to 5 kids. And so I had been in private school, my whole life up until then. And I just remember stepping out onto the blacktop at recess in fourth grade and looking out at all of these kids and feeling so alone. And the friends that I had transferred with from my private school had already made new friends. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have no one. I looked different. I had this curly hair. I probably had hips and a booty in third grade. I was curvy and athletic, and I'm petite. I'm got this raspy voice and these big feelings, and I felt big feelings on both spectrums. The anxious,
Sure.
also the excitement, imagination. So I've got, I'm just bursting with all of it. And then I've got this feeling of, okay, I've got to be the good girl. I've got to make friends. I've got to be like everybody else. I've got to look like everybody else in order to belong and not be abandoned, essentially, because I'm sort of bringing in these abandonment wounds already at 9 years old. By that time, I had developed chronic migraines. That was another way that my body was.
Oh, wow.
My anxiety already. I also.
Your body's like, it's already self-imploding. There's just, I was just imagining this bomb being stuffed into this tiny little box. Like, just, you've got so much energy that needs to be let out and contained in a way that, and managed and released in a way that's healthy. And you're just being told to stuff it.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and, good and bad.
Yeah.
But, oh gosh, so your body's like, at such a young age, I already can't. It's already letting you know I can't contain all this.
Yes. I also think it was a way for me,
so big,
my first attempt at getting my parents' attention. While I was really experiencing these migraines, I know now, obviously this is 20 something years later, but I really believe that our bodies manifest certain experiences and physiological or somatic symptoms based on our mental and emotional health. So I think as a child, I was learning, if I'm sick, my parents will love me and pay attention to me with positive attention. And so I do think that I was sort of manifesting these migraines as a way to have that connection that I felt I was missing. And to be fair, language from my mom was always really positive. It was always, you're so special. You're so beautiful. I remember being in the bathroom with her when I was really little, and my dad often was very critical of her body. And I would hear things from a very young age about ways she needed to change her body and her hair. I heard them fight about infidelity and other women in my dad's life. So at a really young age, maybe 5, 6 years old again, I'm already learning what a woman is supposed to look like in order to be loved. And so anyway, I remember being in the bathroom with her, and she's kind of like, she's looking at herself. And I just have this image of her with tears in her eyes. And I think she had just come out of the shower, and she's just sort of, picking herself apart. I'm not sure what she's saying to herself. And so I'm looking at myself, and she goes, oh, but Mauri, God made your body exactly the way it's meant to be. Your body is perfect. But I wasn't hearing her words. I was seeing and absorbing the way she treated herself. She had a very, she struggled with food and exercise growing up, but also as I was growing up too. And so I internalized that as well, and even though, I don't think there was any, I don't know, maybe there was talk about good foods and bad foods, and I remember always having non-fat milk and Smart Balance butter. And we never had chips. I remember going over to friends' houses, and they had these huge boxes of chips or TV dinners. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is the best thing.
Such a treat.
And, yeah. So anyway, my relationship with my body was also very much from a young age part of my perfection and part of a way for me to control, because I felt so out of control of what was happening at home and my feelings and all of these changes. And so when
It's one of the first things that we have access to control is
totally,
food.
yes. And as girls, we, are not just flooded with messages from our mothers about our body, but it's everywhere. And
Everywhere.
I didn't have access to social media growing up. I was a 90s baby, so that just didn't exist. And now the access that girls have to comparison and, obviously filters on social media and Photoshop and apps and like Facetune, we're just flooding girls with messages about what is quote good enough, or quote beautiful, right? And so of course I had those messages, but not to the extent that we have now, which I see as a major problem. And I don't
Major
know,
problem.
dare I even say like pandemic or epidemic that we have right now with young
Huge.
and young men, I'm sure. But
And seeing how powerful it was
yeah,
already not having
yes,
that and reaching this place in your life and realizing, oh my gosh, the impact that it had when it was just commercials on television that, you saw on shows and things like that. And now to think they are just flooded with these ideas and these messages.
exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so when I was 12, my dad was a road cyclist, and on Thanksgiving morning, my brother came running into my room. Dad's been in an accident. He's in the hospital. We got to go. So my dad had been with his road cycling group and was going down a hill and had gone over his handlebars. He was in a coma. His helmet saved his life, but
Oh,
he had bleeding in his frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that impacts your impulse control and your speech and your higher processing. And as I mentioned before, my dad already really struggled with that. He had a very tough childhood himself with his own abandonment issues. And, I think my dad is probably bipolar and struggles with his own mental health. So the reason I share that is because this accident really just exacerbated all of that. He was in coma, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks and in the hospital. I remember going to see him, and he had broken I don't know how many ribs, and half of his face was
oh my gosh.
paralyzed, and he was purple and blue in the ICU. And we finally got to see him when he was transferred, and he didn't know who we were. um
Oh,
Really, really scary. He could barely talk. And when he came back home, everything just became so much worse. The fighting, the dysfunction, the unpredictability, it was like the volume had just been turned up past 10, And so
I
everything I
can't
was
imagine.
already struggling with just got an exclamation point on it. By the time I was 13, I had lost like 30 pounds. I was, I,
You've lost 30
I,
pounds.
I was starving myself.
A growing
Yeah,
teenager.
I was not
Yes.
eating. I was exercising every day on the elliptical in our garage. I, had a ritual of how many calories I had to burn or how long I had to be on it. And then I would hydrate with Diet Coke afterwards. And, you know, I basically, I was holding on to life, and I had goals
Yes.
with me for sure. And one day, we were making the bed, and I collapsed. I couldn't make the bed with her. And she said, "Oh, this is, I'm 90 something pounds at this point. We've got to go to the doctor." So we finally go to the doctor. And she basically gives me an ultimatum, either you join an outpatient program this weekend and you start eating essentially, or you've got to go inpatient. But I don't recall any explanation of what was happening or why I was experiencing an eating disorder or even the words being used. I mean, it was like very taboo. No one was even saying
Hmm.
anorexic. You have a problem. You are coping through an eating disorder. It was basically like, one night I remember my dad he's a doctor, saying he was going to put a feeding tube down my throat. And it was like another problem that needed to be fixed, and at this point I am, I have so much anxiety and depression and hopelessness, and I'm so out of control. There are nights that I'm like running up and down our hill, screaming, crying. I'm, threatening to end my life and locking myself in the bathroom and pretending to be dead. I'm writing my mom letters that that I'm running away and I'm never coming back. I'm very angry with my parents. I'm blaming them for the way that I am. I'm not taking any semblance of accountability because I didn't know how, of course. I'm 13.
Well, and you're 13. It isn't yours yet. That's the problem. That's the problem, is it wasn't yours to hold by yourself yet. Yes.
I remember them telling me to pack my bags, and I remember the sweatshirt I was wearing, and I remember the Coldplay CD I'm listening to in the car, and I arrived at UCLA. I remember being in the office, in the intake room, and, they're basically all just talking around me. I'm sitting there, a human,
Yes.
a very mature 30-year-old,
Yes.
wise beyond my years because I had to be at that point. And everybody's just talking around me like I'm not even there. And my parents leave, and I remember, they take my shoelaces, my eyeliner, pencil, and I'm in this room, and there's barred windows, and it's dark and cold and scary. And I just remember thinking to myself, and I don't know if this was really my voice or some kind of channel. Like I said, I don't know how I could have possibly known this in this moment of desperation and, complete hopelessness. But there is a moment, whether it's the first night or several nights in, where I just remember looking out and thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get out of this place. And when I do, I'm going to use this to help other girls like me. I'm going to somehow help other girls who struggle with eating disorders and being themselves and family and loving themselves. And I've got to do something with this. And I always look back on that moment, and I have no idea how I knew that, but it's something, that obviously has stuck with me my entire life. I'm 32, almost 33 now. So it's been 2 decades since that experience. But that was my experience with mental health. And, much against my agreement, I was put on antidepressants. I then sort of learned that, and I want to be really careful here not to say that medication or pharmaceutical interventions are not helpful for some people. But for me, I interpreted this as, when I feel bad, there is a pill that can make me feel better. I was not yet receiving, nor probably not open to other coping skills yet, right? Like, I was learning how to survive, but I was not learning about my trauma, why I developed an eating disorder, other than, like the basic, you're trying to control the out of control, you're trying to distract yourself with food instead of thinking about what's really going on. But I wasn't getting into the nitty gritty of, who I was, why this was why I had developed this coping mechanism, and then how to actually change and how to be who I wanted to be. I wasn't learning those coping skills. I was just learning the very basics of, like, you got to eat, and here's, here are these pills to take to feel better. There's something wrong with your brain. And that was my new story. There's there's something wrong with me. My brain doesn't work like other people's. So I need to take these pills to make it, quote, work. And if I feel bad, I just take a pill and then I feel better. So
so the story becomes, you're broken. You're broken. Your experience, there's no room for that. And hearing your story and really understanding what's underneath all of that, it's invalidated, it's dismissed, it's minimized, and there must be something wrong with you. And all of these other people are going to make decisions on your behalf without empowering you or including you and integrating your input into this experience of healing. We're going to just give you a pill, and we're going to call you broken, and then we're going to take more control by letting you know you're broken, you can't trust that something's wrong, and we'll fix you by giving you a quick fix. There was just, I mean, I feel like I'm just hearing a lot of the flaws with the
Yeah.
mental health system, for one, that still very much exists. And then, in parents and the adults who haven't done the work themselves, and being able to see what the real problem is. And I'm just taken aback, Mari. I mean, I just am so glad you're sharing this, because you're not the only one who's gone through this. But I'm so actually incredibly amazed by, I mean, it just breaks me to hear this story. I can just imagine being in the hospital setting at that age when we are so fragile and we're trying to come into our own. We're trying to be the adults, and start to think like adults and be independent, and to, begin to take self-responsibility, and to start to, for you to enter into that stage. But we still really need that adult support. We really need that guidance and mentorship. And usually I say, as we enter our teenage years, really it becomes kind of a collaboration of growth, because we're starting to hand over more responsibility to these children while they're still, I mean, they've got just like martial arts, it's like they're still wearing the pads. We're really padding them up so that when they fall, we're there and we're able to say, hey, that hurt. Yeah, here. But we're able to support them in that growth. You weren't getting that support. You're getting the hits. And then you're being told it's because something about you is flawed. I mean, just powerful. But for you to enter that state of, it actually tells me how much suffering you were experiencing, that you entered this state of, nobody's really going to help me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to help myself. And maybe one day I'll help someone else.
I honestly now also, I remember, and I thought, I felt so guilty about this. And so like, I felt again, like, wow, there is something so effed up about me, that I literally thought to myself, well, if I get sick enough, if I starve myself enough, then I'll have to go to the hospital. And there was a part of me that wanted that. I so badly wanted somebody to just take care of me and be there for
me. Take care of
and so there was
me.
part of me that wanted to go and press pause on life. I wanted to be out of school, right? Like now I'm in middle school, 8th grade, right? So now we know there's like the groups that you sit with at lunch, and who you walk to class with, and who you sit with at recess. And I was in a quote popular group, but I was not quote in it. I had so many friends in so many different walks of groups in school. Was obviously an overachiever, so I was in all honors classes. I had so many friends who were really smart and sweet, but I didn't want to be in their group because they weren't quote popular, right? I thought I needed to be the best again, right? Popular equals best. So I sort of tried to force myself into that group, but they weren't inviting me to things on the weekends, of course, because I wasn't really aligned with them, right? I wasn't actually friends with them. I just thought that was who I was supposed to be friends with. So then I felt alone because I'm not really included in anything. I belong everywhere but nowhere, as I said before, but I'm not myself at all.
My relationship with the world is performative, and it's to be this person other people want from me. And so that was, I wanted to go to the hospital so that I could press pause on that and not be in that uncomfortable experience of feeling alone and feeling different. So there, And let's be real. I mean, we all experience those moments all the way through life where we just, I just want to be taken care of, or I need a break. And I think I talk about this with clients all of the time, how important it is for us, instead of seeing that as a flaw or as us being broken, to listen to that, because that is our body saying, I talk about foundations and scaffolding all the time, that what is missing is the foundation and the scaffolding that can hold up that stage of life that you are trying to be in, that you're supposed to be in. You're telling yourself, I'm supposed to be here, that maybe there's still some work there that needs to be done. That when you're saying, okay, we're talking about regressing, when our children go through regressions, when we go through regressions, that really what's missing is scaffolding. So you're trying to perform at school, you're trying to be a friend, you're trying to be the A student, but the scaffolding and those foundations of relationships and secure attachment and self-awareness and self-confidence, the scaffolding's not there. And so you can pretend, to a certain degree, but after a while it's exhausting because it's not coming from a place of true strength. It's coming from that place of, I have to put on a show so that I can survive. And it's exhausting. It eats us alive. We can't keep it up. Yeah.
Ultimately, I also see it as we're not being true to ourselves, right? So that self-abandonment or that self-betrayal, that is one of the greatest conflicts that we face as humans. Yeah. When who we are truly is not reflected in who we're being, that's it feels like a civil war inside of us, right? But I didn't know that at 13. Yes. I didn't understand. And I didn't, unfortunately, the mental health program that I was receiving wasn't, I don't know if it was even, I don't know if there was anybody yet who was doing this work. Maybe. But I think we're still
not many.
Still in a very old model of mental health. I was, like I said, I'm a 90s, so it was
medical model.
This was this was 20 years ago. So we weren't talking yet about those things. And we also weren't giving young people tools to learn about being themselves or live life on life's terms and understand that there is nothing wrong with anxiety and depression, especially as a 13-year-old.
There's nothing broken about you. There's a lot broken about what's happened to you that's created this scenario, but your body having depression and having anxiety is it telling you it's not the problem. It's the symptom letting you know there's something else that's really, really not healthy for you right now.
Exactly.
It's like eating poison. Your body has all these bumps and has this allergic reaction. It's like saying the allergic reaction is is what's broken. It's no, your body's telling you you've been eating poison.
And if you come back to the the introduction now of pharmaceutical drugs, it was like this Band-Aid on a deep wound. Yes. And we were just, I was picking the scab every week. I'm going to therapy, just basically saying the same things, blaming my parents every time. Okay, we'll see you next week. We'll blame your parents some more, right? Like I'm getting further and further away from my parents instead of learning how to build connection, which was what I needed. And instead, like you said, I am empowering this story of brokenness and victimhood and so instead of really healing and moving forward, I actually, for the next 10 years, I dig deeper and deeper into depression and anxiety and struggles and further away from myself. So now I'm not just battling eating disorders, which would continue to evolve and plague me for the next decade. But now I have learned, I can just take a pill and then I can numb and escape and I don't have to feel bad. So now I'm going to my psychiatrist and manipulating, right? So I can't sleep, take a muscle relaxer. Have anxiety, take Xanax. Can't focus, take Adderall. Crash from the Adderall, take something else to feel better, right? And not only that, but now I'm in high school. So I'm introduced to pot and alcohol and boys. And so I'm trying in every way that I possibly can to numb, escape, feel good enough. I am seeking attention from boys through the clothing that I wear or don't wear. I am still very performative in my grades and, college applications, and which college I was going to go to was like one of the hardest times of those 4 years, right? In any case, I end up getting rejected from the two schools that I wanted to go to. And of course, this sends my world upside down because I had done everything. I had the 4.0.
Yeah.
I had volunteered in third world countries. I was the editor-in-chief of paper. I was in every AP that you possibly could. I went to school at 7 a.m. every day for calculus. I was an athletic trainer, so worked with athletics and sports. I had a job. I had volunteer club. I mean, I did everything, and I still didn't get it.
You checked off all the boxes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Every teacher loved me. They still didn't know, most of them didn't know really what I was still really struggling with. And I think there were a couple that I had opened up to who were so lovely and supportive of me. And yet I was still using this victimhood card, to when I got overwhelmed or couldn't make a deadline, I was, believe me, having mental breakdowns in teachers' offices so that I could get extensions, on my work. So I had learned how to play up what I,
great
and
story.
the story. Yeah. So anyway, I end up at Occidental College, which, like I said, didn't want to go there. Too small, too close to home. My mom had gone there, didn't want to be there. But that's where I finally chose to be. And thank God I did, because, I really believe that everything happens for a reason in our lives. And there are these breadcrumbs, right, that lead us to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. So although I'm still really struggling with my body image, of course, substance and alcohol is rampant in college because everything is so much more accessible.
Easy.
I'm seeking attention from boys. I'm still an athletic trainer, so I'm working with the football team, and I'm like, hooking up with a different boy all the time because I thought that was what love was. I'm still seeking, outside of myself. I decided to get a part-time job in addition to the athletic training job that I was already doing. But that was kind of my nature. Like I said, I started working when I was 15 in restaurants, and I was just used to having that extra money and probably wanted it for weed and booze and things like that. But in any case, I Craigslist and find this part-time job at Karate Kids. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I can work with kids. I thought I wanted to be a therapist because, still am holding on to that 13-year-old girl who wanted to help others like herself. So I'm majoring in psychology. I am pre-med. I think I want to be a psychiatrist. Oof, so glad that didn't work out. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. So I take the job, and I'm there on the weekends teaching. I finally tell them, oh, I grew up doing martial arts. I think I'd like to teach, because I was just working at the desk, and they go, oh yeah, we'd love to have you teach. And so I'm teaching on the weekends, and I end up getting involved in an organization called Kids Kicking Cancer. So I start working at Children's Hospital every week. But I am, I'm going into Children's Hospital every week and teaching children meditation and karate and how to love themselves. And then I'm getting in my car and lighting my little pipe and smoking weed on the way out the parking lot, and I'm showing up to karate classes deathly hungover. And I am living this sort of double life where I am so loved. And so, as you probably remember, I always had a happy face and, bubbly personality, which many of us who are struggling.
Huge classrooms. They were just throwing kids at Mauri's classes because she just brought so much energy to the classroom. So I think there was like a max. We were only supposed to treat. We were only supposed to teach. It's my new language now. But we were only supposed to have about 16 kids per classroom, and there'd be like 24 kids in some of her classes. They would just be packed.
I was I was,
Yes.
so easy for me. This was
Yes.
my gift. And, this is something that I tell young
Yes.
people all the time, that when you find your gift, you have to share it. And was, I had
Yeah.
never felt more myself than I did when I was teaching. And I really liked that version of myself. And
Yes.
so it was really hard because,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, there were these two worlds. I was an addict. I was, I had eating disorders. I was codependent in my relationships. I was still a perfectionist and drowning in college. And then I was here, this awesome teacher, inspiring, motivating, uplifting, aligned with my work as a teacher, not just teaching karate, but this particular school was really unique in the sense of really instilling life skills, as they said, into kids in terms of
Yes.
communication and positive reinforcement and mindset and all of these, elements that made no sense really if you look at it from the outside for me, because I wasn't embodying really any of those things in my other life, but I was here as a teacher. So this was kind of the reason I shared, is
Yeah.
because this is kind of, I think a really important seed in my self-love journey. Yeah.
I was just going to say it. I feel like sometimes we have these moments in our life where, whether purposefully or accidentally, we get reparented. We get to redo a little bit of what was lost in our childhood. And sometimes it really happens when we're actually in the leadership position, when we're in the teaching position. And all of a sudden, you get to see the child as a child, and we kind of project onto that child of, oh my gosh, I could never speak to them that way. And just hearing ourselves parent or teach a child and speak to a child in the way that we really needed to be spoken to ourselves, there's healing in that. And especially these messages of, self-respect and love and, and being able to say those things over and over again, where I think, patience and, some of these
Right.
attributes that maybe we didn't get at all. And then saying it over and over again, it starts to heal our own inner child that didn't get
Exactly.
those
And we call this
messages.
acting as if, right? It's not fake it till you make it. It's different. It's you're acting as the person that you want to be.
Yeah.
You're, doing the footwork, or you're acting in alignment with who you want to be. And so then
Yes.
you sort of, we all know the saying, if you
Yes.
want to learn something, teach it, right? So you start to relearn and start to realize, well, wait, if
Yes.
I'm teaching this, I want to be this too, right? So I start,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
start
You
getting back
naturally
into
benefit
that,
from it.
because I'm teaching it. So I want to actually be in practice myself. Um, and I start to sort of dabble in like bodybuilding.com workouts. I am very much overweight at this point, really inflamed because of all of the, drugs that I'm doing and the booze that I'm doing. And I'm like
Mm.
kind of yo-yo dieting, but I'm starting to like dabble in fitness a little bit. And I have a friend who's teaching me how to use dumbbells, and I'm starting to follow these workouts that, are more fitness related than how many calories you can burn. So I'm trying to make like tiny
Yeah.
little
Yes.
changes. And oh, by that time, I had totally dropped the pre-med thing. I had flunked organic chemistry so many times and withdrawn so many times. I decided to let that go and get my PhD instead. I forgot to mention that, which was that.
I get that. I'd rather
Yeah,
shoot
like
myself in the kneecap than take
my
another
God.
organic chem class.
I would sit in the library, how my brain works, and I would stare at the same page for no joke 6 hours, because I could not reconcile not
Yeah.
understanding it. Like, I needed it to make sense. But the thing about organic chemistry is that there's things about it that don't make sense, that you have to just accept, right? And this would be a
Yes.
theme in my life where,
Yes.
acceptance of things that don't make sense, that you can't make logical sense of. But I have a very masculine brain in that way of like, well, I need to see the steps, like I need to see the the analytics of it
Yes.
or whatever. So yeah, I would drive myself crazy. And part of
Yeah.
that could have been the Adderall too, but I would just hyper fixate on it. So letting go of that was really hard for me, but it was
Yeah.
the universe's way of redirecting me slowly but surely. When I'm 21, maybe my senior year of college, there is an incident on a family vacation. You know, my parents' relationship had continued to spiral downward, especially as my brother and I were not in the house anymore. It was so hard for me to leave my brother there alone with and not be there to sort of take care of him and help him. Um, and he, you know, was struggling in his own right, of course. And so my dad was really struggling at this point and he was showing signs of really struggling in the choices that he was making. You know, some might call it a manic episode that lasted several years. And we went on vacation as a family. My boyfriend at the time played football for a school in New Jersey, and they had a game in New York, and so we went as a family. And my dad disappeared the day that we got there, and this was not unusual for my dad on vacations. He would go off and do his own thing, and we just, you know, that was just the way it was. My brother was very quiet that day and beside himself, but nobody really thought anything of it. We went to dinner. My dad still didn't show up. Nobody could get a hold of him. It was very odd at that point. We were like, okay, this is different. The next day, we were getting on the subway. It was rainy. I was listening to melancholy Sarah Bareilles in my headphones, and you know, it was very New York. And I was, you know, still, like I said, very much still struggling. And I just knew and I'm very intuitive and sensitive and, you know, probably had been since I was a really young kid. And I just felt something is going to go down today. Like something is not right. And we got on the subway, and my dad starts to say to me, hey, what if you and me moved here? And I was like, what? Like all of us? And he's like, no, how about just me and you? And I was like, no. What are you talking about? So we get to this bar right outside of the stadium, and my parents go outside and they start fighting. And my boyfriend at the time, his family is there at the bar too. And I go outside to try to fix it, as I always did, you know, to try to mediate. And they are going at it about a woman that my dad had been with the day before. And he's been having an affair with her, and he's leaving our family. And, you know, my mom is broken. My mom is such a strong woman. And I had never seen her in this way, just emptied, completely emptied. And I looked at my dad, and I think I don't know if I punched him or I slapped him. I can't remember. And I just said, leave, go, leave. And he left. And I proceeded to get completely wasted. I then found out that my brother knew that my dad had been with this woman all day the day before. And so he was just holding that in because my dad had asked my brother to go with him. My brother was like 18 at the time. And poor kid, you know, was holding on to that. And my mom was such a warrior. You know, she wanted to go along with the rest of the day. And I was just, I was wasted, but so myself. I was so broken too, because this just was the pinnacle of the abandonment wounds that I had felt from my dad my entire life, you know, and my dad did
There's just so much there that, I can't, I mean, there's so much there between the power that you have to say go and your dad to go. I mean, the secrecy, your mom being broken, and then to still try to continue through the weekend as if the biggest rupture ever hasn't just, I mean, just how much containment your family attempted to have
And that, as
to
you
stay
heard, that
okay, and
our
how
whole
much
life up
weight
until
you two
that point.
carried.
You know, I mean, that was just,
Yeah.
like you heard, that was just what we did, right? So I didn't know anything different.
Mm,
Um, and I'm still self-medicating
right.
so heavily at this point, right? Between drugs and alcohol. So
You've
yeah,
got to
so
do
I'm
something.
also got that layer going on. Um,
Yes.
and I remember, telling after the game, I remember telling my boyfriend at the time about it. And, bless him, like he didn't have the resources or the tools to be there for me. We were in a very codependent relationship, of course, because I didn't know any different. Um, I, in that
Well,
moment too, I felt like, gosh, I have
yeah.
no one. I am just alone, completely alone.
Yes.
And so the
Yes.
divorce that followed was really, really ugly and volatile and, really scary at times and disruptive. And then after I graduate college, which is, that year, like I said, I decided to move back in with my mom to be with her, to save money. Um, the karate school offers me a full-time gig basically. And they say, hey, we want you to run this school in Redondo Beach. It's 3 minutes from my mom's house and where I grew up. We want you to basically open and close the doors. We want you to teach, 5 days a week. It'll basically be like your own little school. And I'm like, absolutely not. No way. I'm going to get my PhD. I've got to be successful.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
that's all I
You
knew.
were still
My
there.
mom's a lawyer, my
Yeah.
dad's a doctor. I didn't know any other way to be successful except go to college, go to grad school, be a quote professional, and make lots of money and have this title and these credentials and that
Mhm.
success.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't shake it. And it was like a little bird
Yeah.
that was on my shoulder who kept saying like, this way, whispering like, no, you're going to do this. You got to do this way. And I was like, you're a crazy little bird. That makes no sense. I can't be a karate teacher. Like, that's insane. But I just couldn't shake it. And of course, I know now that was my intuition and my first experience probably with hearing my intuition and it not making a lick of sense, but following it anyway. And yes,
It
which
feels
ended up
right.
show up in my life,
It
in
feels
my
right.
current relationship.
What we're going to do is we are going to take a pause in this story. And I want to continue because this can be our part one. This is really setting up to, I'm really glad we were able to stop at this point because this is really setting up for this part two of your story, which is that point after you really began to listen to yourself and really began to hear your own voice and listen to your gut, listen to your own intuition and what followed that, which is really powerful, which broke a lot of rules and changed your whole trajectory. And what I'd really like to do in the next episode, if not next 2 episodes with you, is really dive into your relationships because we've really talked about these foundational relationships that kind of set up who you identified as and how that showed up in relationships and how chaotic that created this kind of world of how you engaged in your relationships and how that shifted once you began to listen to yourself, once you began to really identify your own values. So we'll kind of dive into a little bit more of that part two of this story of who you became, but also how that began to impact the dynamics you had with friendships, with your future partners, what went well, what didn't go well, but what you learned throughout that process. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next part of
So,
our
and
series
I'm
together.
for
So
you listening
I'm
with so much
so
love and
excited.
holding the space for me to share this part one of my story. You're right. It definitely informs what would come next, which would be sort of my second rock bottom and what catalyzed my journey into self-love and then healing my relationship paradigms and the chaos that I had lived in and sort of sent me into my ideal relationship, which is part of where I am now. So I'm really excited to share that piece of how to
Yes.
change and what, or at least, how I experienced change. And hopefully that can help somebody else if they're curious or they feel lost and they don't know what step to take next. I hope that the next part of them with that.
Yes. And just like you said at the beginning, that I think is really important
Oh my God.
is you're still in the journey.
Oh,
If you're not fully cooked, it's not done yet. It's not done yet. But what's different is as we begin to listen to ourselves, the healing begins to happen in real time, and the repairs can happen in real time. And so the resolution and the authenticity that can show up in future relationships once you've really done that work begins to create this momentum in future relationships that creates a sense of satisfaction because you're already on that side of things. So it doesn't mean that conflicts don't arise. It doesn't mean that you're totally done in your evolution, or that it's, there's no knight in shining armor. There's no happy ending in that regard. It's more this element of self-awareness and self-assurance and that faith in your own ability to be able to handle hard things that shows up
in shining armor.
Not self-trust.
You are knight in shining armor. And I didn't,
Yes.
I was always looking for my knight in shining armor. Because of where I came from and what I had experienced, I was always looking for somebody else to save me. And I didn't realize that person was myself until I did. And then
yeah, you become the parent in your story. You become the adult that's now able to reparent yourself and to support yourself and to love yourself. And we aren't, we don't live in a vacuum, that we are a social species and we need those support systems around us, but we also know how to get them. And we also can discern who they are and how they show up and what it feels right, what feels healthy and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And we're able to discern when something is someone else and, it's their stuff and our stuff, and some of that wisdom that develops when we do some of this
if
work.
anybody is listening
and
you need help or you just need somebody to talk to or somebody to listen, please reach out anytime. I really believe in that, the healing together, and it helps me to help you. And so if you're listening and you want to chat, if any of this resonated for you, or you have questions, or you want to know more, you can find me at Mauri Helena on Instagram. You can find me at girlsempowermentexperience.com. Or at Girls Empowerment Experience on Instagram. So please feel free to reach out anytime, really, even just to say hi, or, if you just need a friend to know that you're not alone. I'm always, always here for you.
And when she says that, she means it. She is one of the best, and for those of you who've been listening today, we are so happy to connect with you, to everyone in the audience. And I don't care what anybody says, it is personal. These relationships are real and they matter. And this is how we stay connected. We are a social species and we need one another and we need each other's stories. And thank you so much, Mauri, for sharing your journey and some of the tougher parts of your journey so that the rest of us know we're not alone in it. And I cannot wait to share more of your story over the next couple of weeks. And of course, you guys can stay in touch with me as well at Lift Therapy. And I look forward to talking with you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mauri.
I hope that episode was helpful. Hey, listen, if you want to share your singlehood journey, if you've gone somewhere and come back, if you have revelations and wisdom, please share your story. It's going to help other people. Nothing makes us feel more connected than hearing other people's stories. So just send me the audio of your story, and you could just record it directly from your phone and email it to theangrytherapist@gmail.com. Also, if you want our Single on Purpose newsletter, go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life. You will get tools and articles and other people's stories, and also Zoom links to private gathers. So if you want to join our community, go to singleonpurpose.life. Thank you for listening. Be well. We hope you tell a friend. Hey, before you go, I want to invite you to the Single on Purpose private community online. It's off of social media, no ads, no algorithms. We got forums, we got live groups, we got webinars, and we have social hangs. We also have offline in-person hangs happening soon. So check us out. Go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life, and I will see you inside.